In the cutting wind of an autumn afternoon, a boy walks alone toward a wooden shed at the edge of a quiet town. Inside, hidden between rusted tools and forgotten furniture, a wounded German shepherd limps into the shadows. Without saying a word, the boy raises his hand and offers 10 crumpled dollars to the irritated auctioneer. At the far end of the shed, a man leans silently against a metal beam, watching with unreadable eyes. The boy walks away, guiding the limping dog across the wet gravel yard. And later that night, beneath the loose earth behind their home, the dog begins to dig, until his paw strikes something buried. For a heartbeat, the world holds its breath. Love stories like this one? Then subscribe now, and don't miss what happens next. Comment amen if you believe every life matters. Where are you watching from? We'd love to know. Comment your city or town below, and let's see how far this story of faith and loyalty reaches. The wind swept through Evergreen, Colorado with a late autumn bite that hinted at the first snow. Trees had surrendered their golden leaves to the ground weeks ago, leaving skeletal branches to sway above the cracked asphalt roads. The sky was a moody gray, hanging low over the mountains like an old woolen blanket. In this sleepy town perched on the edge of the Rockies, time moved a little slower, except today. Today was auction day at the old McAllister farm, where whispers of ghosts and unpaid debts mixed with the cold. Among the crowd of bargain hunters, curious townsfolk, and second-hand dealers stood Tyler Brooks, a 12-year-old boy with an unruly mop of chestnut hair and large, observant eyes the color of pine bark. Tyler was lean from years of helping his mother on their tiny plot of land, and bore the quiet gravity of someone who had learned early on not to ask for too much. He wore an oversized flannel jacket handed down from his late grandfather, and held his hands deep in the pockets to shield from the mountain chill. Though his age should have afforded him dreams filled with toys and sports, Tyler's thoughts wandered toward weatherproof boots, feed costs, and his mother's tired cough that had grown persistent since early October. Beside him stood Megan Brooks, his mother, early 40s tall, with a tired elegance about her. She carried herself like someone used to hiding fear beneath purpose. Her hair, once auburn and lively, was now pulled into a severe ponytail streaked with silver. She worked as a part-time house cleaner and tended their garden for produce, every muscle in her frame hardened by labor, every kindness in her voice tempered by the exhaustion of too many sacrifices. Life had not been kind since her husband's accident 5 years earlier, but she bore it in silence, except when it came to Tyler. For him, she softened. The auction was hosted on the sagging front porch of the McAllister farmhouse, a 2-story structure that had weathered decades, but not the loneliness that followed old Walter's passing. He had been a reclusive man, known more for his distrust of banks and humans than for his once prized livestock. With no will left behind and no next of kin to claim the property, the county ordered an estate auction. Tools, furniture, machinery, and even animals were being sold off. The auctioneer, Mr. Denny Lowe, was a portly man in his late 50s with a wide-brimmed hat and a mustard-yellow scarf knotted tightly around his neck. His booming voice echoed across the property as he pointed to rickety chairs and rusted farming equipment, shouting numbers that seemed to bounce off the frost-covered barn walls. Denny had the charm of a man who'd seen too many deals and felt too few things. Tyler wandered from his mother's side as the crowd thinned around the corral area. That's when he saw him. In the far corner, hidden behind 2 broken feed barrels and an upturned wheelbarrow, crouched a German shepherd. The dog was skeletal, his coat a mixture of dirt, old blood, and matted fur that once might have shown a rich sable. One ear stood erect while the other flopped in a torn lobe, and his right hind leg was twisted awkwardly under him as if broken and never healed right. But it was the dog's eyes that rooted Tyler in place, eyes that were amber and heavy with sorrow, the kind of sorrow that spoke of abandonment, not fear. Tyler approached slowly, his boots crunching on frozen straw. "Hey there, boy," he whispered. The dog lifted his head, barely, and gave a single thump of his tail against the dirt. No growl, no snarl, just acknowledgement. Megan spotted her son crouched near the dog and rushed over, brushing hay from her coat. "Tyler." "No," she said firmly, glancing at the animal with a wince. He's hurt. We can't afford this. But he's not mean, Tyler said quietly, not looking up. He's just waiting. For what? Megan asked, folding her arms to keep them from trembling. Her voice carried the weight of too many decisions made alone. Someone, Tyler replied. At that moment, Denny's voice rang out. Last item of the day, folks. We got ourselves a German Shepherd here. Purebred, maybe hard to say with the shape he's in. Starting at $50. The crowd did not move. A woman in a green coat muttered, looks half dead. A man with a leather vest chuckled. He'd cost more in vet bills than he's worth in meat. $30? Denny called. Nothing. 20. Tyler stood. $10, he said, his voice cracking yet firm. Megan gasped. That was all they had in cash. Denny squinted at the boy, then grinned. We got 10. Any other takers? Silence. Sold. To the brave young man, Denny announced, slamming his gavel on a crate. Megan didn't speak. She pulled out the folded $10 bill from her wallet and handed it over with shaking hands. Tyler turned to the dog, now standing shakily on 3 legs, and knelt beside him. You're with us now, he said gently. I'm calling you Max. The dog's ears twitched. He took a step forward and pressed his nose softly into Tyler's palm, closing his eyes as if in relief. They walked back toward the truck slowly. Max limped, each step an effort, but he did not whimper. Megan watched the unlikely pair in silence. She saw how Max leaned against Tyler just enough to draw support, how the boy didn't pull away but adjusted his stride. Something passed between them, wordless but powerful. Back at the truck, Megan spread an old quilt in the truck bed and helped Tyler lift Max in gently. The dog settled into the fabric as if he hadn't rested in weeks. Megan exhaled and finally spoke, her voice quieter now. He's your responsibility, Tyler. I want you to understand that. I do, Tyler replied. He looks trained, she added, almost to herself. Or he used to be. Max blinked slowly, his gaze never leaving Tyler. The wind howled again, scattering dead leaves across the gravel road as the truck rumbled to life. The sun dipped behind the Rockies, casting long blue shadows over the land. As they pulled away from the McAllister farm, Max lifted his head and looked back, just once, as if saying goodbye not to a place, but to a life that no longer served him. They didn't know it yet, but that $10 bond would unravel secrets older than Tyler, expose truths buried under stone and shame, and ignite a battle for legacy, land, and justice. But for now, it was just a boy, a mother, and a dog in the fading light of a mountain town, driving home to begin again. The first night back at the Brooks' modest ranch-style home was colder than usual. A late front had crept down from the Rockies, and by the time the stars had scattered above Evergreen, frost had already begun to whisper across the window panes. Tyler lay under a thick wool blanket on his creaky bed, staring up at the wooden ceiling that his grandfather had once painted himself. The house was small, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that doubled as a dining room, and a living room with a fireplace too stubborn to keep lit without coaxing. Outside, silence blanketed the earth, but inside, Tyler couldn't sleep. Not with Max lying by the door, eyes open, ears twitching. Max, the newly adopted German Shepherd, hadn't moved much since they'd arrived home. He had limped his way to the corner of the living room, circled once on the old rug Megan had reluctantly donated for his comfort, and lay down without complaint. But as midnight stretched into the deeper hours, Max rose. Quietly, like mist on the lake, Tyler heard the soft pad of paws move toward the front door. Then silence. Tyler sat up, his heart whispering something he couldn't understand. Slipping from his bed, he tiptoed across the cold wooden floor, careful not to wake his mother. He cracked the front door and saw Max standing outside in the moonlight. The dog's form was lean, almost too lean, but his posture had changed. He stood tall, alert, scanning the darkened horizon like a soldier on watch. Tyler followed him. Max walked ahead with surprising precision, pausing occasionally to sniff at the ground or lift his head to the wind. Tyler kept his distance, observing. The property line ran along an old fence of rotting posts and wire, now twisted in places by snowstorms and elk. Beyond that fence lay the land belonging to Mr. Bernard Stanley, a man who rarely showed his face in town. Bernard, tall, broad-shouldered, always in pressed coats and woolen hats, had made his fortune in lumber and land development. Now in his 60s, he walked with a heavy cane, the result of a car crash a decade ago, though some said it was a shooting accident. People whispered he had charm when young, but life and profit had hardened his face into sharp angles and narrowed eyes. His property was large but lifeless, no livestock, no garden, just fences and distant surveillance lights. The only warmth it exuded came from the occasional plume of chimney smoke. Max had stopped near a crumbled section of a low stone wall, buried under years of pine needles and moss. It looked unremarkable, just a pile of dislodged stones, likely part of the original boundary when the land was divided a generation ago. But Max stared at it as if it held a name. Then he began to dig. Tyler crouched nearby, watching, heart pounding without knowing why. The dog worked methodically, scraping with his good front paw, ignoring the pain in his rear leg. Dirt flew as he reached a depth of nearly a foot. Then the scratching sound changed, a dull clink. Max stopped. Tyler stepped forward and knelt. His fingers brushed away the remaining soil. There, in the cold earth, was a small tin box, its surface rusted and dented. Tyler looked at Max, who was now sitting, tail curled, breathing hard but steady. The dog's amber eyes met his own. A silent exchange passed between them, not excitement, but gravity. Back inside, Tyler brought the box into his room and locked the door. He turned on the desk lamp, careful to shield the light. The lid creaked as it opened, releasing a scent of old paper and time. Inside were photographs, fragile with age, curled at the edges. There were black and white images of a man in work overalls, smiling beside a large German shepherd that looked so eerily like Max it made Tyler shiver. Other photos showed the same man, sometimes in fields, sometimes beside old structures no longer standing. Beneath the photos lay a folded letter, written in tight, elegant script on yellowed parchment. Tyler unfolded it carefully. It was signed by someone named Jacob Miller, a name he had never heard before. The letter mentioned protection, truth buried with loyalty, and a warning to never trust the man behind the new gates. Tyler read it again, slower. Who is Jacob? Why did he write this letter and bury it? He tucked the papers back inside the tin and hid the box under a loose floorboard beneath his bed, a trick his grandfather had shown him once when hiding silver dollars. Then he lay awake, the image of the dog in the photograph haunting him. It was Max, or his father, or something else. But the eyes were the same. The next morning, Megan brewed coffee in the kitchen while reading the local newsletter. She looked up at Tyler as he shuffled in, eyes dark-circled. "You couldn't sleep either, huh?" she asked, setting down the chipped mug. "I guess I was just excited," Tyler said, avoiding her eyes. "About Max." Megan poured milk into a bowl. Max appeared from the living room, limping less than the night before. He took the bowl with surprising gentleness. Megan observed him for a moment, a softness returning to her face. "You know, he's strange," she murmured. "He watches the house, like he remembers something." Later that day, Tyler asked his neighbor, Mrs. Alice Holloway, about the McAllister land. Alice, in her 70s, was a wiry woman with silver curls and a sharp tongue, but a soft spot for Tyler ever since he helped her fix a broken chicken coop. She wore layers of wool and smelled faintly of peppermint and would smoke. "Jacob Miller?" she said when Tyler asked. "That name takes me back. He used to work for old Walter's father. Ran the property, trained dogs. Quiet man, but good. Disappeared one spring. No one ever said why." "And what about Mr. Stanley?" Tyler asked. Alice paused, her lips thinning. "Bernard Stanley's got more money than God and less charm than a frozen toad. Bought half the hill 20 years ago. There were whispers, always whispers, about how he got Walter to sell the far acres. And about Jacob, too. But no one dares talk long. Stanley listens. Always listens." That night, Max returned to the old wall. Tyler followed once more. The moon was half full, and the wind carried a bite. Max sat facing the wall, not digging, not barking, just waiting, as if something long buried was about to speak. The morning mist lingered low over Evergreen like a breath held too long. The air was still, thick with the earthy scent of pine and smoke. Sunlight hadn't yet broken through the clouds, and the ground remained damp from a quiet overnight drizzle. Tyler Brooks pulled on his patched denim jacket and laced his boots tight, careful not to wake his mother. In his coat pocket was the tin box he had rewrapped in an old towel and hidden in the shed overnight. He had decided he needed answers, ones he wasn't ready to share with anyone, not yet. Max was already awake, sitting alert near the screen door, his tail twitching faintly against the floor. In daylight, the German Shepherd looked more imposing. Though still thin and weathered, there was a military symmetry to his form, an innate sharpness in his gaze. He had begun to gain strength, but every movement still carried traces of a wound that had never been fully tended. Tyler gave a gentle nod, and Max rose without command, following the boy as they set off down the trail that cut across the back edge of the property. The trees there grew thick, tangled from years without pruning, their trunks gnarled and mossy. Beyond them, where the earth dropped slightly and leveled out into a clearing, sat what remained of the old Westmore Ranch. A place Tyler had only heard of through the muttered stories of elders at the feed store or fragments of conversations his mother never meant for him to hear. He stepped through the thicket and emerged into the forgotten clearing. Moss blanketed a crumbling foundation of stone. Broken beams jutted from the ground like the bones of something ancient, and a rusted horseshoe lay half buried near what might once have been a doorway. It wasn't just ruins. It was the ghost of a home. Max froze at the edge. His ears flattened. He let out a soft, guttural whine and circled once before lowering his body and lying down, tail tucked. Tyler approached slowly, his eyes scanning every shape and line for something that might match the photos he had found. Images of Jacob Miller standing beside structures that seemed familiar now, even in their collapse. He stepped onto the stone slab and crouched by what remained of a chimney base. The mortar had cracked, but embedded in the side was a single iron plate with initials still legible. J.M. Tyler's chest tightened. It was real. All of it. A snap of a branch nearby made him turn fast. But it was only a deer, young with spots still visible, leaping away into the brush. Max stayed down, but his eyes had turned toward the northern edge of the ruins, the direction of Mr. Stanley's estate. It was as though the very presence of the name summoned caution in the dog's body. Later that afternoon, Tyler returned home and found his mother in the kitchen chopping root vegetables for stew. Megan had the sleeves of her faded blue sweatshirt pushed to her elbows and a look of tired concentration on her face. Her hair was pinned back with 2 rusted bobby pins, and she didn't look up when Tyler entered. "You were out early," she said without turning. "Did Max walk okay?" "Yeah," Tyler replied, his voice level. "We just followed the trail. Didn't go far." Megan nodded, but said nothing more. Tyler knew she was distracted. The bills had been piling up. The pantry had more empty jars than full ones. Still, she tried to make things feel normal. That night, Tyler sat on his bed and took out the tin box again. He had reread the letter from Jacob Miller so many times. The words now echoed in his head, even when the box was closed. "If you're reading this, then perhaps your family, or perhaps your danger. The land remembers. So do the dogs." It was a strange letter, too poetic to be entirely practical, but it hinted at something hidden, something valuable, or damning. Tyler needed more than faded letters. He needed names. Records. So the next morning, after chores and with Megan gone to clean houses in town, Tyler biked to the Evergreen Public Library, a brick building built in the 1940s with tall arched windows and the smell of yellowing pages that clung to the air like dust. At the front desk sat Mrs. Evelyn Mercer, a petite woman in her late 60s with a neat silver bob and reading glasses perched halfway down her nose. She was always dressed in long earth-tone cardigans and spoke with a voice so soft it made you lean in without realizing. Tyler asked her about land records and the history of the Westmore Ranch. Mrs. Mercer tilted her head, surprised. "That's a name I haven't heard in some time. Westmore Ranch was one of the oldest properties in the area. Belonged to the Holloway family before it passed to the McAllisters. Jacob Miller worked there as foreman, yes. Disappeared without a word in 2002. Very odd. She leaned closer. Some said he knew too much about something. But that's gossip. She helped Tyler find a microfiche reel from local papers in the early 2000s. There was a brief obituary for Walter McAllister's brother and a mention of property consolidation involving Bernard Stanley. Tyler read it twice. No mention of Jacob. But on a different reel, an older one, he found a blurry newspaper photo, Jacob Miller, standing with a group of ranchers and county officials. Behind them stood a younger Bernard Stanley, smiling, hand on Jacob's shoulder. The caption read, Community Development Initiative 1997. The article spoke about a land deal, Stanley's first big acquisition in Evergreen. Jacob had been there, which meant they had history, possibly conflict. Back home, Tyler spread the photos and letter across his bed. Max sat nearby, always watching. You knew him, didn't you? Tyler asked. Or someone in your bloodline did. Maybe you were trained to find this place. Max gave no sound, but his tail tapped once against the floor. That night, as they took their usual walk near the edge of the property, Max suddenly stopped and began to growl, low and guttural. Tyler followed his line of sight and saw a black pickup truck idling just inside the tree line, its headlights off. A figure stood beside it, barely visible through the dusk. Tall, stocky, a cane in one hand. Mr. Stanley. Tyler stood frozen, one hand resting gently on Max's back. The man didn't approach. He watched, then, without a word, turned and stepped back into the truck. The engine purred to life, and the vehicle disappeared down the gravel road behind the trees. Max barked once, not loud, but full of warning. Tyler tightened his grip on Max's collar. Something was being watched. Something was being protected. And maybe, just maybe, something was being threatened. The morning arrived with a brittle stillness, the kind that seemed to hush the very wind. A pale mist clung to the treetops in Evergreen, Colorado, and the frost on the ground sparkled faintly beneath a weak sun trying to push through the clouds. Inside the Brooks household, the scent of oatmeal and burnt toast lingered in the air. Megan Brooks stood at the kitchen sink, her hands submerged in warm water, scrubbing a chipped mug with more force than necessary. She hadn't slept well. Something about the previous night, the image of the black pickup, the shadowed figure in the trees, still gnawed at her. Tyler sat at the table, eyes flicking from Max to the window every few seconds. Max was pacing, his nails clicking on the wooden floor like a slow, persistent clock. He kept glancing at the front door, ears flicking back each time the wind howled. The tension in his posture was unmistakable. Megan noticed. He's been like that all morning, she asked. Tyler nodded. Since before sunrise. He sat by the door for an hour before even drinking water. Megan dried her hands and knelt beside Max. What are you sensing, boy? She whispered, brushing her fingers across the soft fur on his back. Max didn't respond, but his body tensed suddenly, and his ears snapped forward. Then came the knock. 3 quiet taps on the wooden frame. Measured. Not urgent. Max growled instantly, a deep, rising rumble that vibrated through the floor. Megan stood slowly, exchanged a glance with Tyler, then moved to the window. Outside, on the gravel path, stood Bernard Stanley, tall, broad-shouldered despite the heavy gray wool coat he wore buttoned to the throat. His cane, carved from black walnut, rested in his left hand while the other held a flat-brimmed felt hat against his chest. His silver-streaked hair was slicked back, and his expression, as always, was unreadable, equal parts polished charm and veiled calculation. Megan opened the door just wide enough to stand in the gap. "Good morning, Mr. Stanley," she said, polite but cautious. Stanley gave a shallow smile. His voice was smooth, practiced. "Mrs. Brooks, I hope I'm not disturbing your morning. I was walking the property line and noticed a few loose boards on your east fence. Thought I might offer some help patching it up. I've got extra lumber." Megan didn't smile. "That's kind, but we're managing." Stanley's eyes shifted slightly, just enough to catch a glimpse of Max, who was now standing just behind Megan's legs, body rigid, lips curled back. "Ah," Stanley murmured. "You've got a new friend. German Shepherd, isn't he?" Tyler stepped into view. "His name's Max," he said flatly. Stanley's eyes lingered on the boy a moment longer than necessary. "Fine breed," he said. "Loyal. Protective. Sometimes a bit too much, depending on how they were trained." Max snarled, low and steady. Stanley didn't flinch. "I remember Walter had dogs," he continued, turning back to Megan. "Back when he still used the land for cattle. I wonder if this one's from one of those lines. You know, those old dogs were practically legend around here. Bred to guard, to track, even find things buried long ago. Remarkable creatures." The statement wasn't innocent. Megan stiffened. "Max was at the auction. My son bought him. That's all we know." Stanley nodded slowly. "Of course. Just making conversation." He paused. "Still, I imagine in clearing up the place, you might have come across old things. Documents. Letters. Walter was notorious for hiding things. Records, especially." Tyler felt a cold sweat form at his neck. Megan's reply came with an edge. "If we do, I'll be sure to hand them over to the proper authorities." Stanley's smile never broke, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Naturally," he said. "If you ever need help deciphering anything old, I've got a bit of experience with historical deeds. Old land tends to carry its stories badly." He tipped his hat. "Well, I'll leave you to it." As he turned and began walking back toward the path, Max lunged forward, stopped only by Megan's quick grip on his collar. Stanley didn't look back, but the tightening of his shoulders was subtle and unmistakable. When the man was out of sight, Megan closed the door and locked it. Her face had lost all color. "He knows," Tyler said quietly. "About the box." Megan stared at him. "What box?" Tyler hesitated. Max turned to him as if sensing the truth hovering. Tyler reached under the couch cushion and pulled out the tin box wrapped in cloth. Megan sat down hard. "I didn't tell you because I didn't understand what it meant," Tyler began. "But Max found it, buried near the old stone wall. There are pictures, letters. One's from Jacob Miller." Megan whispered the name like a prayer or a curse. "Jacob? I haven't heard that name in 20 years. Tyler handed her the letter. Megan read in silence. Her hands trembled slightly. "Jacob worked for my grandfather," she said. "He practically ran the ranch after Grandpa got sick. One day he just vanished. No goodbye, no trace. Some people said he stole from the family. Others said he found out something he wasn't supposed to." Her voice cracked. "My father never spoke of it, but I remember, after Jacob disappeared, Bernard Stanley started visiting often. Too often." Max lay beside them, ears up, eyes fixed on the door. Tyler looked at his mother. "We can't trust Stanley. Not with any of this." Megan nodded slowly. "Then we don't. Not a word. Not to neighbors. Not to anyone. If there's truth in this, it could be dangerous." That night, the family sat at dinner in near silence. Max remained posted near the front door, eyes darting at every creak of the floor or gust of wind. Tyler didn't touch his food. Megan had pulled the blinds tight, something she'd never done before. The tin box now rested in a locked drawer inside the old sewing cabinet, wrapped, bound, and hidden beneath layers of fabric. And for the first time since they'd moved onto the land, Megan told Tyler, "If Max ever growls like that again, you wake me. I don't care what time it is." They went to sleep with Max lying in the hallway, guarding both rooms like a sentry who'd seen too much war. The frost had thickened overnight, turning the fields behind the Brooks property into a shimmering white quilt. The sun had barely lifted when Tyler pulled on his thick coat, the zipper half broken, and stepped outside with Max at his side. The German Shepherd had barely slept. He'd spent most of the night pacing between the front door and the hallway, occasionally pausing by the old sewing cabinet where the tin box was locked away. Now, as if driven by something stronger than instinct, he led Tyler down the overgrown trail behind the chicken coop and into the woods once more. Tyler followed, one hand brushing the snow-heavy branches out of his way. Max's paw prints left deep indentations in the icy ground, but he moved with purpose. They passed the ruins of the old Westmore Ranch, crossed the dried creek bed, and came upon a small clearing Tyler had never seen before. It was circular, almost unnaturally so, and surrounded by cedars that leaned inward, their boughs tangled like clasped hands. In the center, the earth was bare, no grass, just frozen dirt packed tight, as though something heavy had once rested there. Max began digging. Tyler hesitated only a second before dropping to his knees beside him, his gloves barely holding back the cold as he helped scrape away the soil. After several minutes, his fingers struck something hard, a wooden surface, damp but intact. Max stepped back, his tail still, gaze locked on the spot. Tyler cleared away more dirt, revealing iron-reinforced corners and a tarnished brass latch. The chest was about 3 feet long and a foot deep, worn with age but sealed tightly. He wiped the mud from the top and saw initials burned into the wood. CH, the initials of his grandfather, Charles Holloway. Tyler ran back to the house, bursting through the back door with his cheeks flushed red and his breath clouding the air. "Mom, it's here. It's real. You have to come." Megan turned from the sink, startled. Standing next to her was Chris McCall, Tyler's stepfather, a broad-shouldered man in his early 40s with sandy blonde hair, a square jaw, and a permanent smudge of engine grease under his fingernails. He worked as a mechanic at the Evergreen Auto Yard and had a quiet, observant nature. Though not overly affectionate, he was fiercely protective of the family, and his loyalty ran deep, especially toward Megan and Tyler. Chris raised an eyebrow. "Slow down, kid. What's going on?" "Max found something. In the woods. A chest. It's got Grandpa's initials on it." Within minutes, they were back in the clearing. Chris crouched beside the half-exposed chest, inspecting it with a mechanic's care. "This thing's been down here a long time," he muttered, tapping the side. "Help me lift it." It took both of them to haul the chest out of the ground. The hinges creaked as Chris cracked the lid open. Inside were bundles of documents, yellowed with age but still legible. Megan took out a thick folder first, land deeds, dated and notarized, including titles for the farm and several surrounding lots. Then came a leather-bound notebook filled with ledgers, records of payments, and contracts. Near the bottom of the chest, in a wax-sealed envelope, was a letter addressed to my daughter and grandson. Megan opened it, her hands trembling. The letter was written in the sharp, slanted handwriting of her father. "If you are reading this, it means something has gone wrong. I paid Bernard Stanley every cent I owed. I kept copies of the transactions. He refused to sign a final release and threatened to bury me in debt unless I handed him the land outright. I buried these documents here in case he ever made a move. I couldn't trust the bank, and I couldn't trust the court. But I trust that the truth will outlive lies if someone fights for it. Protect Tyler. Protect the land." Megan's breath caught in her throat. She passed the letter to Chris, who read it in silence before folding it carefully and placing it back in the envelope. Max lay beside the chest, his body still, head raised, as if guarding something sacred. "We need a lawyer," Megan said quietly. Chris nodded. "This is fraud, Meg. He tried to steal everything your father worked for. And now we've got the proof." Tyler looked between them. "Do we go to the police?" Chris frowned. "Not yet. We need to go through everything. Organize it. Make copies. We don't hand this over until we know who's clean and who's not." That night, the chest sat on the kitchen table like a silent witness to generations of betrayal. Megan flipped through the contracts while Chris scanned each page with his phone to back it up. Tyler watched Max, who had curled up beneath the table, his eyes trained on the front door. At one point, there was a knock at the door, just the mail carrier, a cheerful woman named Brenda Clay, in her 50s with a warm face and a penchant for wool scarves. She dropped off a package and chatted briefly with Megan, unaware of the storm brewing inside the house. After she left, Megan turned to Chris. "We have to be careful. Stanley's watching. If he finds out we have this—" "He already suspects," Chris said. "But he doesn't know we've got physical proof. And we keep it that way." Tyler couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Max curled at his feet. "Did you know where that chest was this whole time?" he whispered. Max raised his head slightly, thumped his tail once, and lowered it again. Tyler smiled despite the fear. "You're not just a dog. You're a compass." And somewhere in the distance, beyond the treeline, a vehicle engine purred to life. Watching. Waiting. The wind outside howled like a restless spirit, rattling the window panes of the old farmhouse. Snow swirled in gusts across the backyard, coating the barn roof in white and freezing the copper pipes beneath the porch. Inside the Brooks home, the fire in the hearth had burned low, leaving only glowing embers that cast flickering shadows across the wooden floorboards. The hour was late, almost 2 a.m., and the world was asleep. But not Max. The German Shepherd lay at the base of the stairs, one ear flicking every few seconds, eyes open and alert. His breath came slow and measured, but his muscles were tense beneath his thick fur. Tyler, asleep in the room above, stirred once in his dreams but didn't wake. Megan and Chris had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from a day spent scanning and organizing the chest's documents into folders now locked inside the bedroom closet. Outside, the gate creaked. It didn't groan with the wind like before. It creaked once, deliberately. Then silence. Max rose. No growl. No bark. Just precise movement. He padded toward the front of the house, steps so soft they barely stirred the air. He halted near the coat rack, ears pointed forward, tail low and still. From the window, a faint glint of light, like the reflection of metal, flashed across the glass. Then came the click of the back door. Soft. Subtle. A thief's entrance. In the hallway, a shadow shifted. A man stepped in wearing a long dark overcoat, gloves, and a wool hat pulled low over his face. Though he moved with caution, there was an arrogance to his posture, shoulders squared, chin high. In his right hand, he held a small flashlight, and in the other, a lockpick tool now tucked into his coat pocket. Bernard Stanley. He paused in the kitchen, scanning the room. His gaze fell on the empty dining table, then lifted toward the stairwell. The living room lay quiet, dark save for the orange glow from the fireplace. He crept toward the hallway that led to the master bedroom. And then Max stepped into the light. The two locked eyes. Stanley froze. Max did not bark. Instead, he positioned himself directly between Stanley and the hallway, his body rigid, tail raised, lips pulled back in a silent warning. His eyes glinted gold in the firelight. "Easy now," Stanley whispered, slowly stepping back. "You're not my enemy. I just need what's rightfully mine." Max snarled low and sharp, the sound rising like a warning siren. From upstairs, Tyler jolted awake. In the living room, Megan stirred and blinked toward the sound, followed by Chris, who immediately stood and reached under the couch for the baseball bat he kept hidden. "Max!" Megan called out. The bark that followed was thunderous. Sharp. Commanding. Chris burst into the hallway, bat in hand, and froze when he saw the figure at the back door. "Hey!" Stanley lunged toward the door, trying to flee, but Max charged, teeth bared, forcing him to stumble backward. He barely escaped through the frame, slamming the door shut behind him. Max hit the door hard, claws scrabbling at the wood as Stanley disappeared into the night. Chris swung the door open and sprinted onto the porch, bat raised. But the yard was empty. Fresh footprints led toward the treeline, already fading under fresh snowfall. Megan dialed 911 with trembling fingers. Her voice was calm but tight as she gave the dispatcher their address and described the break-in. Tyler ran down the stairs, heart pounding, eyes wide. "Was it him?" he asked. Chris nodded grimly. "Stanley." "No doubt." Within 20 minutes, the sheriff's deputy arrived. A young woman named Clara Jensen, barely in her 30s, slim with a freckled face and serious eyes behind square glasses. She wore her badge like armor and moved with the quiet efficiency of someone used to listening more than talking. "Tell me everything," she said, notebook in hand. As Chris described the intruder and Megan handed over the partial shoe print captured in the fresh snow, Deputy Jensen frowned. "Unfortunately," she said, "without security footage or eyewitnesses beyond the family, we can't press charges tonight." but I will file an official report and assign a patrol car to check in on your road every couple hours." Megan's voice was steady but firm. "He said he'd come back. With a lawyer." Deputy Jensen nodded. "Then you better be ready. I suggest making multiple copies of whatever documents you've got. Hide them in more than one place. And if you haven't already, talk to someone with legal teeth. Fast." After the officer left, Chris locked all 3 doors, reinforced the windows with nails and boards, and double-checked the lock on the closet holding the documents. Tyler sat beside Max, wrapping both arms around the dog's thick neck. "You knew he was coming," Tyler whispered. "You always know." Max licked his face once, then rested his chin on the boy's knee. The next morning, the family met at the kitchen table. Chris had already made calls to a law office in Denver. Megan began uploading digital copies of every document to a secure cloud drive. Tyler was assigned the task of labeling and hiding flash drives around the house, one beneath the porch, another inside the base of an old lamp, and a third wrapped in tinfoil and sealed in a mason jar buried in the backyard. By sundown, their modest farmhouse felt like a fortress. Max remained glued to the front door. When Brenda Clay, the mailwoman, stopped by with a package and knocked cheerfully, Max growled low until he saw her face and relaxed. Even Tyler noticed. Max now only trusted a few. That night, Megan taped a single sheet of paper to the refrigerator door. In red ink, she wrote, "If something happens to us, this is not just a land dispute. It's a cover-up. Read the documents. Find the truth. Protect Max." And beneath it, she placed a photo of her father, Charles Holloway, shaking hands with a young man who looked remarkably like Jacob Miller. The morning air carried a metallic chill, sharper than usual, as if the frost had borrowed something from the cold steel of secrets buried too long. The snow from the night before clung stubbornly to the fence posts and tree limbs, untouched by sun or wind. Megan's truck hummed gently as she guided it down the winding rural road, gravel crunching beneath the tires, her face set in quiet determination. Beside her, Tyler sat bundled in his navy jacket, clutching a small envelope that held copies of the most crucial documents from the chest. In the back seat, Max lay curled, head resting on his paws but eyes alert, ever watchful through the fogged-up window. They were heading toward the south end of the county, beyond the wheat silos and cattle pens, where the land sloped gently toward the foothills. Their destination was a modest cottage tucked behind a row of windbreak trees. Bare branches stretched like crooked arms against the pale winter sky. It belonged to Elijah Kemp, once a ranch hand, later a groundskeeper, and long ago, a man who'd vanished from local memory. Except, of course, from those who still needed the truth. Megan parked near the front gate. The wooden sign read Kemp Homestead in flaking white paint. The screen door creaked as they approached, and before Tyler could knock, it swung open. Elijah Kemp was a tall, sinewy man in his late 70s, his brown skin lined by sun and sorrow. His back was slightly bent from years of labor, but his eyes, clouded by age, still held the sharp glint of a man who noticed everything. His white beard framed a mouth that rarely smiled, but when it did, it softened the hard edges of his expression. "I knew you'd come eventually," Elijah said, voice gravelly like boots on gravel. He stepped aside, motioning them in. The house smelled of cedar wood and old leather, with walls lined in faded photographs and a wood-burning stove casting a steady warmth from the corner. Megan hesitated, then entered. "Mr. Kemp, I'm Megan Holloway. This is my son, Tyler." "I remember you," Elijah replied, settling into a wooden rocker. "You were barely taller than a fence post the last time I saw you. Your daddy, Charles, was a good man. Too good to die leaving this mess behind." Tyler stepped forward, placing the envelope on the nearby table. Max followed him in silently and sat by the fireplace, his ears twitching as if familiar with the scent of the place. Elijah's gaze fell on Max. His mouth parted slightly. "Well, I'll be. That dog," he whispered, then leaned forward, his gnarled hands resting on his knees. "He's one of them. No mistakin that posture. Head up, eyes low, tail still. That's training. That's blood memory." Tyler blinked. "You know Max?" "Not him exactly," Elijah said, eyes never leaving the dog. But I knew the line. Back when I worked this land, Jacob Miller had a shepherd. Strong. Smart. Named her Luna. Girl could find a rattlesnake in the brush before you even smelled it. She was bred special, not from no regular kennel, but from an old handler down in Mississippi who trained for military contracts. But Jacob didn't send her to war. He kept her here to guard the land. Like she was born to it. Megan leaned forward. You were close with Jacob? Like brothers, Elijah nodded. Built fences together, broke horses together. He loved this place more than breath. And he trusted Charles. But when Charles got sick and things started to slip, that's when Stanley began slinking in. His voice dropped. Stanley was always sniffing for weakness. Claimed to be a lender, but he never loaned without clause. Jacob found something, books that didn't match. Payments that disappeared. He confronted Stanley once. I warned him to keep his voice low. Next week he was gone. Just vanished. Not a note. Not a call. Luna stayed behind, refused to leave the porch. Wouldn't eat for days. Tyler felt Max nudge his leg. Do you think? Max is Luna's son. Elijah considered this. Son? Maybe not. Grandson more like. She had a litter before she passed. 3 pups, born in a winter just like this one. Someone must have kept the line going. And whoever trained Max did it right. He ain't just a pet. He's a guardian. Megan's fingers tightened around her coffee mug. Mr. Kemp, we found a chest. Buried deep. Documents. A letter from my father. It proves everything. But Stanley, he's already tried to break into our home. Elijah let out a long breath. Then you don't have much time. You got proof. You take it to someone who still believes in justice before Stanley buries it all again. I already contacted a law firm in Denver, Megan said. They're reviewing the documents now. Good. But be warned, Stanley's got connections. Judges, county recorders. Men who owe him favors. Tyler pulled something from his coat pocket. A folded photograph of the man in the tin box. Is this Jacob? Elijah's hand trembled as he reached for it. Yes, he murmured. That was taken the day he planted those orchard trees along the west border. Look at him, full of hope. Tyler looked at the picture again. Behind Jacob stood Luna. The resemblance to Max was uncanny. I want to find out what happened to him, Tyler said quietly. It's not just about the land anymore. Elijah nodded, his eyes glistening. You're your grandfather's blood. And your dog, he's got Luna's soul. If anyone can do it, it's you too. Before they left, Elijah handed Megan a rusted key. Back of my barn, he said. There's a trunk under the floorboards. Jacob gave it to me just before he vanished. Said to guard it until someone with fire in their belly came asking. The courthouse in Cedar Hollow was not a grand structure. It was a modest red brick building on Main Street with ivy crawling up one wall and a bronze statue of a blindfolded lady holding scales at the front. Yet on that cold Thursday morning, it felt like the center of the world for the Brooks family. The sky was pale, drained of color by the bitter wind, and the leafless trees along the sidewalk rattled with each gust as if echoing the tension in Megan's chest. Inside, the courtroom was quiet, but filled with that particular kind of stillness that precedes something momentous. Megan sat on the left bench, dressed in a charcoal gray wool coat, her dark brown hair pulled into a low bun. Her face was calm, but her eyes revealed the sleepless nights and weight of responsibility she had carried. Beside her sat Tyler, now in his Sunday best, a button-up plaid shirt and black jeans, clutching Max's leash tightly. Max, freshly brushed, his golden brown fur gleaming in the morning light, lay at Tyler's feet with his head high, watching every movement with trained precision. Across the aisle, Bernard Stanley leaned back in his chair. Dressed in a tailored navy blue suit, he still carried the smugness of a man used to buying silence. But his fingers tapped nervously against the briefcase on his lap. Next to him sat his lawyer, Harold Gates, a silver-haired man in his 60s with deep-set eyes and a hawk-like nose, known locally for defending shady businessmen with technicalities and charm. Judge Meredith Langston presided over the case. She was a tall woman in her 50s with short auburn hair and sharp cheekbones, dressed in black robes that barely concealed her no-nonsense demeanor. She was known for her intolerance toward deceit and her unwavering fairness, which made her both respected and feared in Cedar Hollow. After the preliminary statements, Chris, Tyler's stepfather, was called to the stand. He recounted the discovery of the buried chest, the contents within, and the events leading up to Stanley's midnight break-in. Then Megan took the stand, her voice unwavering as she spoke about the land's history, her father's final letter, and the family's decision to protect the documents. The courtroom grew silent when Tyler was allowed to speak. At just 12, his testimony was simple but heartfelt. "Max saved us," he said. "He didn't just bark or bite. He showed us where the truth was hidden. He protected our home because he knew something was wrong. He was trained to guard something important, and he knew we were part of it." Judge Langston listened carefully. Then the court clerk presented the original documents, mortgage records, canceled checks, land titles, all scanned, verified, and compared with county archives. A forensic handwriting expert, a short, bespectacled man named Dr. Randall Morris, was brought in. He confirmed the authenticity of Charles Holloway's signature and the tampering with later versions found in county records, specifically those submitted by Mr. Stanley over the past 2 years. What turned the tide was the letter from Jacob Miller, discovered in Elijah's barn just the day before. It was a handwritten confession addressed to Charles Holloway, dated the week before Jacob vanished. In it, Jacob expressed fears about Stanley's plan to seize the land and hide the records. He included details only someone working with the documents would know, including a note about Luna's training lineage and a warning to trust no one except the family dog. Stanley's lawyer stood, objected to its admissibility, but Judge Langston silenced him with a glance. When all was said and done, the courtroom held its breath. "In light of the overwhelming evidence," Judge Langston began, her voice calm but cutting, "this court finds that the Holloway family fulfilled their financial obligations in full. The deed remains their lawful property. Furthermore, the court has reason to believe that Mr. Bernard Stanley tampered with legal records and submitted false claims for personal gain." There was a pause, then the final blow. "This matter is now referred to the county prosecutor for criminal investigation." Stanley rose, his face drained of all color. He opened his mouth to protest but found no voice. His lawyer quietly began packing up documents without a word. Outside, the gathered townsfolk, some curious, some supportive, watched as Stanley walked to his car alone, ignoring the local news reporter who tried to get a comment. He drove away, his tires crunching over the gravel as if retreating from a battlefield. Back at the farm, snow had begun to melt. The icicles dripped steadily from the porch roof, the first sign of spring's arrival. Tyler and Max sat side by side on the porch steps, the boy sipping warm cocoa, the dog's ears twitching to the quiet rhythm of distant birdsong. For the first time in weeks, Max was relaxed, his head resting against Tyler's leg, his breathing slow and peaceful. Megan came out with a blanket and wrapped it around Tyler's shoulders. "You did good," she whispered. "He did better," Tyler said, glancing at Max. "He never gave up." Later that week, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from Judge Langston herself. Inside was a formal document confirming the land title, free and clear, transferred officially to Megan and her heirs. Alongside it, a handwritten note. "You protected something sacred. May your family grow strong on this soil." Elijah Kemp visited once more before heading south for warmer weather. He handed Tyler a photograph, Jacob Miller standing with Luna, behind them the very same porch now beneath Tyler's feet. "That picture belongs here," Elijah said. "Just like you too." Tyler hung the photo in the hallway near the fireplace. Every afternoon, as golden light streamed in through the kitchen window, it illuminated the faces in the frame. And just below, Max would nap, chest rising and falling, as if carrying the breath of all the generations that had come before. Sometimes, God's greatest miracles come wrapped in fur and silence. This story reminds us that what the world throws away, God can still use for something greater. A broken dog, a poor boy, an old secret buried beneath the earth. And yet, through faith, courage, and love, justice was restored, and a family was protected. In everyday life, we may overlook the quiet signs: a loyal animal's stare, a child's instinct to do good, or a closed door suddenly opening. But when we slow down and trust, we might just witness God moving in unexpected ways. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment to tell us what you believe God saved you from. And if you believe in second chances and silent angels, type Amen below. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories that remind us of the light in the darkest moments. May God bless you and protect you always.